This is Leah Bai. Have you ever noticed that words in American English seem to run together? In order to sound natural and American, you want to sound relaxed, smooth, or even lazy. I couldn't do it because my native language, Chinese Mandarin, is really different from English. For example, 我爱你 means I love you in Chinese. I say each Chinese character clearly and separately. If I apply this habit to my English speaking, I will sound foreign, choppy, and unnatural. I love you. Let me ask Phyllis to drill my linking in American English. Hey, good morning, Phyllis. How are you?
Good morning, Leah. How are you?
Wonderful. Today, I'm going to work with you on my favorite subject, linking. And here is the example from my book, Lamps, on page 29. And I will read it to you. And I also highlight with the words that relate to linking in the paragraphs, and your honest feedback
Yes.
will be truly appreciated. Okay. Mm-hmm. I often asked my preteen daughter to correct my pronunciations. Every night before her bedtime, I would read a page of one of her favorite chapter books, such as The Wimpy Kids. She could spot my mistakes and point out my mispronunciations. She was so direct and brutal. I had to fire her many times and hire her back. Put your pride on hold and ask for help. Your children can be your free tutors or with some incentives. Back to you, Phyllis.
Hi, Leah. As you said, linking is a very common thing that we use in our American English. Again, having lived in Shanghai, I understand exactly how, saying each part of Mandarin is highly specific. And even though it sounds as though they're speaking faster, when we listen very closely to Mandarin, it's definitely very distinctive between the tones that they use in different words. However, in standard English, you will find a lot of linking. What happens is you go from a high meaning word to a low meaning word. So when you said read instead of read a page, it's read is high meaning going into the which is just a noted word. And instead of read page, we read a page, read a page. We read a page. So that the low tone goes down on The same thing what happens when we say one of. We take that and rather than saying one of, one of the things we want to make for certain is that we link that so that we get voicing continuously through that. There are other words that go from voice sound to voiceless sound. Those will not be linked often. Yet when you have one of, you've got a voiced in that goes into an sound, which is voiced. So one of, we simply put those in there. Rita, the D is a voice cognate of the t sound. So we simply link those together, Rita. The same thing happens with such as. Again, a high meaning word, such, a low meaning word, marker word, such as. The same thing with point out. Mm-hmm. You will hear, instead of saying point out, now Brits will say point out. American Standard, they take that T because it's voiceless, point, no voice going to it,
out.
And turn it into its voiced cognate, its voice fellow, which is a D. So you say point out. Mm-hmm. That's where that one is. The next part is you say put your pride on. Again, linking that high meaning word to a connector word such as pride on hold.
Pride on hold.
Yeah. So that is understanding how that fluidity helps reduce the amount of stress put on the muscles for American Standard. I return it back to you.
Thank you, Phyllis. And I know some of the rules, but I know there are a lot of those linking rules, what links to what. We can do more research online or through YouTube's. Right. And why linking is so important for non-native speakers to really practice so they can sound fluently and show their confidence in their English skills. Because when you don't have that linking right, you sound chubby, and the people really get confused about what you are saying, right?
Yes. Well, they call them thought groups. When we talk in one word at a time, the whole thought is in one word at a time, and it requires too much neural engagement, too much brain engagement on top of the listener, and the listener who is accustomed to these linked sounds will stop listening. Consequently, using that linking makes it sound more fluid. It's in thought groups. So when we want to say something like want to, you will often hear wanna. I want to do that today or tomorrow. And if it's a high meaning phrase, you will hear more clear pronunciation. But the phrase want to is something you'll hear out of Brits. Out of most Americans, you hear wanna. Okay.
Yeah, one thing I noticed is that if I'm watching news, the anchors were reading news, telling us something, I can understand everything they are saying. I live in this country for 3 decades. But if I watch movies, sometimes when the characters are having conversation, I get lost. I have no clue what they were talking about. Probably because they have a lot of linking and some of the sound and disappear into the conversation. Is that why?
Yes. And it's depending upon what type of character they're playing.
Right.
If they're playing somebody who is from, the city of New York or Boston, they're talking at a much faster speed. If they're playing somebody who is from Boston, Chicago, where people tend to talk like this and they really want to talk pretty fast and they want you to gather their ideas right now. However, when we're talking to when you're talking to a TV person or a broadcaster of some sort, they've learned broadcast English. They've learned how to talk in slower thought groups. They've learned how to speak in such a way that people can understand their thought groups. And that broadcast English is now what they call standard English.
I think that's important to know. I'm thinking the way for me and my fellow audience, non-native speakers, to improve their linking is, first, the rule, right? Which word you should be linking together or you can link them together. The second part is, like we talked earlier, slow down. That will give you time to do everything correctly. And would you mind me to read this paragraph one more time to you and pay attention to what we just talked about to see if I can improve my linking. I often asked my preteen daughter to correct my pronunciations. Every night before her bedtime, I would read a page of one of her favorite chapter books, such as The Wimpy Kids. She could spot my mistakes and point out my mispronunciations. She was so direct and brutal. I had to fire her many times and hire her back. Put your pride on hold and ask for help. Your children can be your free tutors, or with some incentives.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you.
In doing these linking things here, I want to add something else. One of the things that is typical for Mandarin speakers in pronunciation in English
Mhm.
There is a rule in Mandarin between certain hard sounds. There is an sound inserted.
Mhm.
And what happens is you would say, like, I would read a page.
Mhm.
A Mandarin speaker has a tendency to say, I would a read, put an sound between two consonants, especially
Mm.
after D. The
Mhm.
D seems to be the one where I've noticed most of the people inserting this sound as a marker, which is a Mandarin rule. That pronunciation rule shows up in English as well. We had, let's see, where was it? There was another one. It usually comes after D, and I think it was, I remember hearing it in.
Well, I remember you helped me many, many times. I had a tendency to put a after and. Remember? You
Yes,
know, I like yellow, green, and red. I always put and red. That was the old habit. I try very hard to erase that.
right.
That's what you're talking about, right? It's a
And if
habit.
and ends with a D.
Yeah.
And the next adjoining word started with a consonant. And if we found, like, would read, you'd see that after that D would be Rita, would a read. If we're hunting for another D after here, it seems to be on T and D.
How about the last paragraph? Put your pride on hold and ask for help. That's another D, 2D there.
Yes. Well, we've got pride on, that's fine. But D goes into and. Sometimes what you do is you do say, hold on.
Hold on.
And
Put your pride down, hold on, ask for help.
Yeah. Now, it usually follows after a T or D that you will put that insert. If there's a consonant following, that T, then there's going to be an insertion.
Yeah, Phyllis, one thing I really truly appreciate your help is you had 25 plus years of experience helping international professionals. Mandarin speakers had their struggles, and people from India, other foreign languages have their unique struggles because some of the songs are not easy for them, right? So it's tough.
It's also dialect dependent. Now, Mandarin everybody has their version of Mandarin, right? PRC China is a huge place. Simply as well, you're down in Texas and you've heard English spoken in many ways from Boston to Texas to wherever. You understand that English has, even though we have the same spelling, the pronunciation can change from place to place.
I think, the more you and I talk, the more I realize how important it is to slow down and use pause and focus on content words. And I start to sound like you now about what to do. You train the trainer, right?
Train the trainer. Again, because you're very specific minded, given you zero in on tangible targets. That skill set that you picked up in your engineering background, you apply in every other learning that you have. And understanding those specific, meaningful, actionable targets lets you see the rule behind them. So that's, by doing that, looking for patterns is critical when we are trying to understand what somebody else is saying.
So would you please give us a couple takeaway points for me and my audience so we can actually apply to our daily practice?
The critical aspects to remember when we want to do linking is that using the power of pause between our idea groups, using between noun phrases. I have a lovely little house that I visited yesterday and the day before. Using those the power of pause lets your mouth reset so that you can then focus on linking that I, do that linking for that I visited the day. That way you can link those things as well. It allows you to set up for that linking. So you're tending to do this very well as a professional speaker. One of the things that you do as you're setting up to say the next phrase is you literally take a step. You take a step before you want to say the next thing. Using that, it helps you link, helps you reset so that you can say the next phrase appropriately so that you can link the next phrase.
Thank you. Yeah, don't forget, other than your voice, you have your body, you can help your body
Correct.
language as well, non-verb expression.
Correct.
Thank you, Phyllis.